They broke you. Life came at you with everything it had, and it didn't hold back. People you trusted drove the knife in deepest. Circumstances you never asked for crushed what you were building. And somewhere in the wreckage of all that, you started to believe something dangerous. You started to believe that broken was your permanent address. But here is what they never taught you. The most formidable men in history were never born powerful. They were forged, beaten into shape by destruction, loss, and humiliation. Machiavelli himself did not pen his greatest masterpiece from a throne. He wrote The Prince from Exile, stripped of rank, stripped of dignity, forced to the floor by the very system he had dedicated his life to serving. And yet that manuscript became the most feared blueprint for power the world has ever known. That is not coincidence. That is a pattern. Because a broken man who refuses to stay broken becomes something this world has no language for, something it cannot predict, something it cannot manipulate, something it absolutely cannot stop. Today, I'm giving you 7 lessons, not motivation, not comfort. These are surgical truths, principles embedded inside Machiavellian philosophy, used by history's most untouchable figures, men who took their lowest moments and turned them into their greatest weapons. If you are ready to stop being a victim of your own story and start becoming the architect of your own power, let's begin. Lesson 1. Pain is your greatest teacher. Here is the first thing Machiavelli understood, that the majority of men will go to their graves never grasping. Pain is not your enemy. Pain is your most honest teacher, your most loyal advisor, and your most lethal weapon if you learn to wield it. Every man who has ever risen to genuine power, real influence, and lasting freedom did not rise despite his suffering. He rose because of it. The fire that was designed to consume him instead hardened him into something unbreakable. Most men, when life strikes them, choose one of 2 paths. The first path is collapse, drowning in self-pity, replaying every failure on a loop, letting the wound become the man's entire identity. The second path is escape, numbing the pain with noise, distraction, with anything that prevents them from sitting alone with the truth of what happened. But Machiavelli's hidden law demands something entirely different. Sit in it. Don't flinch. Don't flee. Look directly at what broke you and ask the one question that weak men are too afraid to speak aloud. What is this teaching me? Because pain, when studied rather than avoided, reveals your blind spots with ruthless precision. It exposes who was never truly loyal. It strips away every comfortable illusion you were hiding behind and forces you to see reality with a cold, clear eye. And that clarity, that brutal, uncompromising self-awareness is the very foundation every powerful man is built upon. Machiavelli wrote that the wise man must always choose the path of necessity over comfort. Pain is necessity. It is the universe stripping away everything that was keeping you small, everything that was keeping you weak, everything standing between you and the man you were always capable of becoming. Stop mourning what broke you. Start studying it. Your breakdown was never the ending. It was always the blueprint. Lesson 2. Silence is your most powerful weapon. Listen carefully, because this single lesson, truly mastered, will make you the most commanding presence in every room you ever walk into. Machiavelli understood something about silence that the modern world has completely abandoned. He understood that the man who controls his tongue controls his fate. In an age where everyone is desperate to be heard, desperate to be validated, desperate to explain and justify and defend themselves at every turn, your silence becomes something rare, something unsettling, something that forces the people around you to question themselves before they ever think to question you. Most men talk far too much. They announce their plans before they execute them. They expose their wounds to people who privately celebrate those wounds. They argue when they should be observing, they explain when they should be withdrawing, and they beg for understanding from the very people who are quietly cataloging their vulnerabilities. This is how ordinary men remain ordinary. The Machiavellian mind operates on a different frequency entirely. It understands that every word you speak is intelligence you are voluntarily surrendering. Every reaction you display is a map you are handing directly to your enemies. Every time you feel the impulse to defend yourself to someone who has already made up their mind about you, you are handing away power you will never recover. Silence is not weakness. Silence is strategy. It is armor that no blade can penetrate. When you stop explaining yourself, people start doubting themselves. When you stop reacting, people lose control of the interaction. When you speak only when your words carry absolute purpose and weight, You become someone that others simply cannot read, cannot predict, cannot manipulate. And an unpredictable man is an untouchable man. Machiavelli wrote that the lion cannot protect himself from traps and the fox cannot defend himself from wolves. So the wise man must be both. Silence is how you become the fox. It is how you see the trap before it springs shut. It is how you study every player in the room while revealing nothing about yourself in return. From this moment forward, let your stillness speak louder than your words ever could. Procracadu, Lesson 3, master your emotions, or they will master you. This is where most men fall apart, not on the battlefield, not under external pressure, not when life strips them down to nothing. They fall apart from the inside because they never learned to govern the one territory that matters more than any external kingdom they could ever conquer, their own mind, their own emotional world, their own inner state. And until that inner world is disciplined and coldly controlled, everything they construct on the outside will eventually collapse because the foundation beneath it is unstable. Machiavelli was ruthless on this point. A ruler governed by his emotions, he understood, is not a ruler at all. He is a puppet, and the strings are held by whoever knows how to provoke him, flatter him, or make him react before he has time to think. This is not ancient history. This is happening to men every single day. A man loses his temper in an argument and destroys a relationship he spent years building. A man lets jealousy warp his judgment and makes a decision that sets him back a decade. A man lets fear paralyze him at the precise moment that action would have changed his entire trajectory. Unchecked emotion is the most effective weapon your enemies will ever deploy against you. And the most devastating part, they don't even need to fire it themselves. They simply create the conditions and you detonate on your own. The Machiavellian man sees this trap clearly and refuses to walk into it. He trains himself to pause where others react. Their limited thinking, their fear of greatness, their comfortable surrender to smallness, it will seep into you so gradually, so quietly, that you won't notice it happening until one day you look in the mirror and realize the man staring back at you has shrunk. Machiavelli understood the lethal danger of the wrong counsel more deeply than almost any philosopher before or after him. He dedicated entire chapters of The Prince to the art of choosing advisors, warning that a ruler surrounded by flatterers, men who tell him what he wants to hear rather than what he needs to hear, is a ruler already marching toward his own destruction, because flattery is poison dressed as loyalty. It feels like medicine, it acts like a slow poison. The men around you who celebrate every decision without question, who never challenge you, who applaud your mediocrity as enthusiastically as they would applaud your greatness, these men are not your allies, they are your anchors. Stop wearing your emotions like a target on your chest. Stop letting your reactions serve as a user manual for how to destroy you. The man who cannot be provoked cannot be defeated, and the man who cannot be defeated becomes exactly what this world fears most. Lesson 4. Choose your circle like your life depends on it, because it does. There is a law operating silently in your life right now that most men never become aware of until it has already cost them everything. It is the law of proximity, and it states with cold and absolute precision that you will become the average of the people you allow into your closest circle. Not similar to them, not merely influenced by them, you will become them. Their ceiling will become your ceiling. Their mediocrity will become your mediocrity. To observe where others explode, he develops the rare and deeply intimidating ability to feel the full force of an emotion, anger, humiliation, grief, betrayal, and then choose, deliberately and consciously, how he responds to it. Not suppression, not denial, mastery. Understand the distinction. A man who feels nothing is numb. A man who feels everything but is controlled by nothing, that man is dangerous. Stoic philosophy taught that you cannot govern what happens to you, but you hold absolute authority over how you interpret it and how you respond to it. Machiavelli took that principle and sharpened it into a blade. When someone tries to humiliate you and you respond with stillness, you win. When someone betrays you and instead of collapsing, you recalibrate coldly and deliberately, you win. When life deals you the worst possible hand and instead of breaking, you use that pressure to compress yourself into something harder, denser, and more precise, you win every single time. Does their presence sharpen you? Does their honesty, even when it's uncomfortable, push you forward? If yes, protect that relationship. People like that are rarer than any resource on Earth. But if their presence drains you, dims you, or quietly pulls you back toward the version of yourself you are trying to escape, you owe them nothing, not your time, not your energy, not your future. You are not simply choosing friends, you are choosing your ceiling. You are choosing the man you will be 5 years from now. Choose accordingly. Lesson 5. Never reveal your next move. Let your results speak without warning. There is a mistake that destroys more potential greatness than failure ever could. More than bad timing, more than lack of resources, more than any external obstacle the world places in your path. That mistake is this: announcing yourself before you have arrived, telling people your plans before you have executed them. They are keeping you comfortable in a harbor you were always meant to leave. And then there are the other kind, the energy vampires, the silent saboteurs, the ones who smile to your face and quietly resent your progress in their hearts. Machiavelli called these the most dangerous of all, because their betrayal doesn't announce itself. It moves in shadows. It works through subtle undermining, through planting seeds of self-doubt, through being absent at the exact moments you need support and present the moment you stumble. These people must be identified with cold, clear eyes and removed without guilt, without lengthy explanations, without looking back. Because the Machiavellian philosophy demands ruthless discernment. It demands that you evaluate every relationship not through the lens of history or sentiment or loyalty to what once was, but through the lens of a single, brutal question. Does this person make me better? Seeking validation for a vision that hasn't yet materialized. Sharing your goals with people who have no evidence yet to believe in you, and in doing so, handing them the exact ammunition they need to discourage you, doubt you, and plant seeds of hesitation inside the one mind that must remain unshakable. Your own Machiavelli observed princes, generals, and rulers across centuries, and identified a clear pattern that separated those who conquered from those who collapsed. The ones who conquered moved in silence. They planned in private, they endured in darkness, and then without announcement, without warning, without seeking anyone's approval, they arrived. By the time the world understood what had happened, it was already done. When you announce your intentions prematurely, you invite criticism before you have the results to silence it. You give your competition a clear view of your trajectory, your timeline, and your vulnerabilities. But when you move in silence, something entirely different happens. You preserve your energy because you're not spending it defending a vision to people who can't yet see it. You protect your momentum because doubt, especially from people you respect, is one of the most efficient momentum killers in existence, and you build something far more powerful than anticipation. You build proof. The world does not reward intention. It does not celebrate potential. It does not bow to promises. The world responds to results, and results alone. A man who talks about what he is going to do occupies a fundamentally different position than the man who simply does it and lets the outcome speak on his behalf. One inspires mild interest, the other commands absolute respect. So close the chapter on seeking permission. Go dark, go deep, go to work with a ferocity and focus that the world around you cannot yet comprehend. Build in the shadows, sacrifice in the silence, and when the time comes, and it will come, let your arrival be the only announcement you ever needed to make. Because the most powerful entrance a man can make is the one nobody saw coming. Lesson 6. Strategic patience, the weapon that defeats every enemy without a single confrontation. In a world addicted to instant gratification where every man wants results now, where patience has become nearly extinct, the man who masters the art of waiting becomes the most dangerous force in any environment he enters, not because he is passive, not because he lacks capability, but because he understands something the impulsive and reactive will never grasp. Timing is not merely a component of strategy. Timing is the strategy, and the man who controls his timing controls his destiny, with a precision that no amount of raw talent or brute force can ever replicate. Machiavelli studied this principle with the focus of a man who had lost everything by moving too soon and rebuilt everything by learning to wait. He watched rulers destroy decades of strategic positioning in a single moment of impatience. He observed generals squander decisive advantages because they couldn't tolerate the discomfort of holding still while the perfect moment assembled itself. His conclusion: fortune favors the bold, but fortune sustains only the patient. Because boldness without patience is recklessness. It is energy without direction. It burns everything, including the man wielding it. But patience combined with boldness Patience that is active, calculated and intentional, rather than passive or fearful. That combination produces something the world has no real defense against. It produces the man who strikes only when victory is already guaranteed. Most men, when they feel wronged, want to respond immediately. When they feel overlooked, they force their way into relevance. When pressure closes in, they panic and move, not because the moment is right, but because the discomfort of stillness has become unbearable, and this is precisely where they hand their power away. Understand what strategic patience actually means, because it is widely misunderstood. It is not resignation, it is not surrender, it is not the passive acceptance of circumstances you have the power to change. Strategic patience is the disciplined act of refusing to let your emotions dictate your timeline. It is the ability to sit in discomfort, in uncertainty, in the tension of an unresolved situation, and remain clear-headed enough to recognize that the moment has not arrived, and that forcing it will cost you far more than waiting for it ever could. Make peace with the process. Make peace with the waiting. Make peace with the invisible, grinding, unglamorous reality that kings are not made in moments of action the world gets to witness. They are made in 10,000 moments of disciplined restraint that nobody sees and everybody eventually feels. Lesson 7. Reinvent yourself completely. Burn the old version and rise without apology. There comes a moment in every man's life, a specific, defining, irreversible moment, where he faces the most important decision he will ever make. Not about career, not about money, not about where to live or who to love. The decision I'm speaking of is more fundamental than all of those combined. It is the decision to either remain loyal to the version of himself that circumstances, people, and pain constructed around him like a prison, or to look at that version with cold, ruthless clarity, recognize it for exactly what it is, and burn it to the ground. Without hesitation, without ceremony, without a single backward glance, Machiavelli understood that history's greatest leaders were not men who remained consistent. They were men willing to transform completely when transformation was demanded. He wrote that the wise man adapts himself to circumstances the way water takes the shape of its container. Not because he is without form or conviction, but because the ability to shed an identity that no longer serves the mission is itself the highest form of strategic intelligence. Most men are imprisoned not by their circumstances, but by their self-concept, by the story they've accepted about who they are, what they deserve, what is possible for someone with their history. They drag the weight of every mistake into every new situation, every new opportunity, every new version of their life that could have been different if only they had been willing to let go. But the Machiavellian philosophy offers no comfort to the man who chooses the prison of his past over the power of his potential. It is ruthlessly, uncompromisingly forward-facing. It demands that you assess yourself with the same cold objectivity you would apply to any strategic problem, identify what is working, eliminate what is not, and rebuild with the precision of an architect who has studied every flaw in the original structure and is now constructing something that cannot be broken in the same way twice. Reinvention is not a betrayal of who you were. It is the highest form of loyalty to who you are capable of becoming. Shed the outdated narrative. Retire the limiting beliefs installed in you by people who had already given up on their own greatness. Release the habits, the environments, the relationships, and the internal dialogues that were architected for a version of you that no longer exists. Rise without explanation. Rise without seeking the approval of people who were comfortable with your limitations, because your limitations made them feel secure in their own. Rise with the cold, quiet, unshakable confidence of a man who looked into the fire that was meant to destroy him and chose deliberately and completely to become something that fire never anticipated. Final truth, the untouchable man, 7 lessons. 7 surgical principles drawn from the depths of Machiavellian philosophy, but before we close, there is something beneath all 7 of them. Something that holds the entire framework together, the way a spine holds a body upright. Without this, the lessons are just words, and words without a foundation are nothing but noise. The final truth is this: becoming untouchable is not a destination you arrive at. It is not a reward handed to you at the end of a difficult season. It is a decision, a daily, deliberate, unrelenting decision to operate from a place of such complete internal sovereignty that the external world, its chaos, its cruelty, its betrayals, its noise, loses its power to define you or determine the direction of your life. Machiavelli's deepest and most misunderstood teaching was never about manipulation. It was never about ruthlessness for its own sake. At its core, his philosophy was about one thing above all else: the cultivation of a mind so disciplined, so strategically sovereign, so completely governed from within rather than from without, that circumstances become tools rather than obstacles, and the world's chaos becomes information rather than a threat. The untouchable man is not the man without enemies. He has enemies because any man worth becoming will always draw opposition from those threatened by what he represents. The untouchable man is not the man without pain. He feels it fully and without flinching. He is not the man without failure. He has failed, perhaps more catastrophically and publicly than most. What makes him untouchable is that none of those things have the final word. His enemies sharpen him, his pain instructs him, his failures restructure him, and through every single one of those experiences, he remains the author of his own narrative. Never the victim of someone else's. This is what you are building, not a performance of strength, not an image of power projected outward to impress people who don't matter, but a genuine, unshakable, internally rooted sovereignty that no circumstance can revoke and no person can dismantle. Carry these 7 lessons not as inspiration that fades by morning. Carry them as law. Live them as code. Apply them with the cold precision and relentless consistency of a man who has decided, finally, completely, and without reservation, that he will never be broken by the same thing twice. The king is not crowned by others. He crowns himself through discipline, through silence, through patience, through reinvention, through mastery of his inner world, through ruthless curation of his circle, and through the willingness to study his pain until it becomes his greatest weapon. That is the Machiavellian code. That is the hidden law. And now it belongs to you. Men rise from one ambition to another. First, they aim at security from attack, and then they attack others. Niccolo Machiavelli.